love guitar nerds. This is Rod Gels. I'm welcoming Dave Rubin and Bob Margolin to this podcast, and what we're talking about is a really cool history and how-to on Chicago blues guitar. It was a book, Chicago Blues Slide Guitar for the Complete and Definitive Guide by Steady Rollin', Bob Margolin, and Dave Rubin. Hal Leonard Publications. It's a really cool book. I'm a history guy, so I love the history of it. And the videos were good, but we'll talk about that later. So, how did you guys get together and start creating these books? Because they're wonderful. So, what is your history together?
Bob, you want to start, or you want me to start?
Why don't you start with the Muddy Waters video and instructional video from 1998.
Yes,
because that's the first project we worked on, although I'd met you a few years before in New York City.
we did, and we had a jam. He invited me to sit in with you at the Old Tramps. I think it was the Old Tramps.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was. I was playing there with Billy Boy Arnold, probably 95 or something like that.
Right.
So your relationship goes back easily 25 years at least.
Yeah,
It
does. I had enjoyed Dave's writing in Guitar Player magazine from the 70s on, and when he came up and introduced himself at the show, I said, "Oh, I know who you are."
Yeah.
And I invited him to sit in with us, and we've been buddies ever since. And he came up with this project for a Muddy Waters guitar style instructional video for Hal Leonard.
Yeah.
And we did that in Hollywood.
Wonderful. How was that?
There was an actual studio there and a camera person, and there was the weirdest part of it was a impossibly beautiful woman put makeup on me. You deserve that.
Yes. That's rock star stuff. So so the Muddy Waters in the late 90s, that was the first thing you did. And then did you ever teach before? Did you ever do any teaching prior to that?
No, but not before that. But when Dave proposed the video, I had just in 1997, I had just gotten my first laptop computer, my first any kind of computer.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce Siglauer from Alligator Records, which is who I was recording for at the time, I said, "Well, I'm going to get a computer, no more faxing between us." And he says, "Oh yeah, it'll be fine for you. People a lot dumber than you can do it."
Well, yeah, that's what is that?
That's him giving a compliment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he said, "Yeah, you won't have a hard time with it. You'll get it real quick."
How has it been? How has your time with the computer been over the years?
Well, the first thing that I did with it was to write this script for the Muddy Waters video, what would be covered, and then Dave and I refined that, and then we went into a studio and a video studio and recorded everything quite efficiently. Where Dave is great at producing these things.
Thank you.
He's got some
really
experience.
moves it along and makes it happen.
Labor of love.
Yes, you got some experience. So, all right. So now, years later, you find out that there is an interest in the like rhythm guitar, and there's interest in the slide guitar. Were you surprised at that there people are coming back to the the roots of American music?
I live in a world where people are really deep into that. I have been since I was a teenager in
Hmm.
the 1860s, and uh,
Vampire.
there is a whole blues world that does not care at all about the rock world. They very traditional people,
Hmm.
and but there's also musicians that want to learn a little bit about the older styles of blues, which I fell into, and I love that style of music. I
From
didn't
day
invent
one,
that.
was you were a teenager, this is the stuff that you were checking out.
Yeah, I started playing because of Chuck Berry and followed the path of his inspiration back to Muddy Waters.
Okay. Okay. For our people, my audience, explain your link to the blues icons is Muddy, one of them. You played with a lot of people, but Muddy Waters is the one that everyone remember. How did you meet Muddy?
Well, I loved his music a lot.
Mhm.
And as soon as I heard it on a college radio station blues show in the mid 60s, and when by the late 60s and early 70s, I was going out to see him when he was playing in Boston. At the
Mhm.
time, he would have been in his late 50s at that point. Uh, I went out to see him, and I still have some pictures I took of the band from the audience with a little Kodak Instamatic camera.
Mhm.
But then some of the bands I was in by the early 70s opened shows for him, and he could see that I really loved that old style blues. I was just smart enough not to play Muddy Waters songs on a Muddy Waters show.
Okay.
And
Okay. Yeah.
and I but I was playing Jimmy Reed, Elmore James, Jimmy Rogers, just a lot of the
The icons.
usual icons, a lot of the usual suspects, I was
Yeah.
going to say.
Yeah.
And Muddy liked that. He was very encouraging to me, and I'd sit in the dressing room while his band was doing three numbers to warm up and talk to him, and I couldn't believe I was doing that. It was a real thrill.
That is, I don't even want to cheapen it by saying that was your college, because it was so much more than that. It was I couldn't only imagine. So like
Uh,
the hotel, you in one of your books you talk about that there's a the hotel room lesson to you with Muddy.
Well, actually, it was more like an audition.
Okay.
I went down to one of Muddy's gigs in about August 1973, and I was the first person to get there. Nobody else was in there. First person I saw was his harmonica player, who Muddy introduced as George Mojo, dreamy-eyed, good-looking Buford. And Mojo asked me the fateful question, "Do you have any reefer?"
Okay. All right. What was the
And
answer?
naturally, hospitably, I brought some down. And then he said, "Oh, Muddy just fired Sammy last night. Wait here." And before I could do anything or say anything, he went and got Muddy Waters out of the dressing room. He came out and said, "Oh, good. Come to my hotel tomorrow and bring a guitar," just presuming that if I had an opportunity to play with him, that I would want to do that. And
Of
he
course.
was 100% right.
Yeah.
So I went into the next day. I didn't have an acoustic guitar, so I brought an electric guitar and a small Fender Deluxe amplifier from the 1950s that I had bought in 1967 for $40.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Muddy, is this the kind of amplifier you guys used in the early 50s? He said, yeah. And he wasn't too interested in it.
All right.
But that was the kind, though, little tweed amplifier with a 12-inch speaker in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, play the guitar. So I played a slow blues introduction in Chicago blues style.
Mm-hmm.
And he started singing along with it, which was certainly the biggest musical thrill I'd had
I can imagine.
at that point. And I don't think he thought I was a great guitar player, but he thought I could learn. And what I was doing was more like a puppy doing a trick. He called his girlfriend into the room and said, hey, listen to this kid play my stuff and do it again. Sit up and beg, roll over. So,
So he had a mind for
more like that.
he had a mind to mold. Like, did he have a teacher? Like, he took you up under his wing. Would you?
In a little bit, but it was mostly he was hiring me to be a sideman that could provide the style of music that he liked.
Yeah.
A little bit of both.
Yes. So this book traces the is kind of the result of many lessons before Muddy and till present day, that your life's work. Some of your life's work. I love these books. The fact that like this is what you've done all your life. So it's like there's a lot of people that for me, I sample a lot of things, but it's this is let's talk some history about the Chicago. Where does slide guitar come from? We talked in the book. It was talking about the history of it and how it is dated back to like the diddley bow. Well, what do we know?
Dave wrote that part. I never had a diddley bow.
Yes.
Maybe Dave did.
I have one.
Nor did I ever have one, though I love playing slide too. Not because you've read it, Rod, and we'd like to sell some books here. By the way, I would like to mention that people can get this book directly from Bob. And that would be the place to get it.
Actually not anymore.
No. Oh.
I've gone out of the retail business now.
Okay.
So they can get it from Amazon, but I don't have any more to sell and not planning on getting any.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, Amazon or Music Dispatch, which is Hal Leonard's mail order arm, if they want to do that.
Yes.
But
there will be a link. There will be a link placed in the description of this video.
But I'll just fill that in a little bit, your question, and let's get it back to Bob. For Guitar One magazine, I wrote a feature about the question you're just saying, slide guitar. Where did it come from? Did it come from Hawaiian guitar, or did it come directly from African retention with the diddley bow? And people had various opinions, and actually Bob was interviewed for it as well. So nothing was decided conclusively, Rod, about that, because it was interesting, because many of the blues artists that I interviewed for that question, they were divided on it. Some did think it was from Hawaiian guitar, which apparently there was a craze for that around the turn of the 20th century, and that Hawaiian musicians came over and toured the South, and blues musicians must have heard some of it. I don't know. Nobody has the answer to that, which
Yeah.
is unfortunate about a lot of blues history, because nobody was writing it down at the time.
Yeah.
We're all trying to learn it now.
The other part of this, there might have been some of both.
You're probably right.
Diddley bow from West Africa. Okay.
Right.
It was a part of their culture. It was a part of their like they would take objects and like the bottleneck, but they would take other objects and on a wire and create music from it, and this was a craze. As I'm learning this from you, like in the 30s, the diddley bow was a big thing in the South. It was so I don't, but how far back does like you talked about W.C. Handy liking the sound of the original blues guitar is bottleneck, according to W.C. Handy. That he learned.
Well, he's got that famous story.
Yeah.
Here, the slide guitarist in Tutwiler, Mississippi in 1903. It's so famous, it's been told a million times. I've told it 500,000 times myself. He had never heard that. W.C. Handy came from like society music and classical music. He didn't even know about the blues till things like that. We're going to get off on a thing there, but what do you think, Bob?
He's muted. Bob's muted.
He's muting.
Hey, Bob, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I would like to go get my dog was barking a lot before. I would like to go get a AC adapter for my computer. So it's going down about 1% every minute. So I'm going to be right back while Dave goes and. Now here's Dave.
All right.
I still think we should do who's on first, but okay, we'll do that. We'll do that the next time.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
So the slide guitar predates kind of like the 12-bar blues kind of form that W.C. Handy popularized. These are the melodies that W.C. Handy was.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, Rod, because this stuff wasn't documented.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which I think is a great regret and a shame that it seems to me that not until like the 1930s, in my research, Nora Zeal Hurston, who was a great African-American writer and researcher, did she start in the 30s asking some blues musicians who'd been alive at the end of the 19th century about some questions. I had that when I was talking about the art of the shuffle and boogie woogie, and my point is that nobody was asking these questions that we're asking until much further after the fact, and so you have to assume that a lot of things were happening at the same time. One of the things is that blues musicians were playing banjos before they were playing guitars.
Yes,
the banjo was the instrument, and the way apparently they tuned them much lower than what we're used to hearing the banjo. So it was probably in the guitar range. So you have that whole thing going on. But if we go by the general consensus that blues, as we would recognize them, developed sometime after the Civil War in the South.
Yeah.
Okay, so sometime
coming from work songs, coming from different sources, but
field hollers,
trying to get the melodies of the work song into your hands.
Yep.
And
yeah, that's a good description. So that happened over time, and probably in various places in the South, and with various people trying it. It's just, it's not. We like to see it as a straight line history. I do, because I can understand it that way. One thing leads to another. Yeah. But of course, it's vertical.
Yeah,
it's not horizontal.
Reality is this.
Yeah. But I think we could. I could live with that. What you said about the slide. I think that it probably was an early manifestation of blues guitar. Even if it was on the banjo,
Yeah.
and picking and fretting too. At the,
Yeah.
you know, I think it probably was all happening.
Mm-hmm. Like,
But
yes. So now we have the Delta blues. For those of our audience that doesn't understand what the Delta blues was, how would you define the Delta blues?
all right, how much time do we have?
Real quick.
Well, the Delta being that part of that part of the Mississippi and
Delta, yeah.
Mississippi State and the Mississippi River,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where the cotton was picked. You know, so you
All the major blues artists.
many
Yeah.
they worked on plantations.
Mm-hmm.
They worked on the plantations picking cotton.
All within like an hour of each other.
Yeah, yeah. So that seems to be, you know, no, there's so many digressions that we could have here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the debates going on even now is about where the blues actually began, because there's people, including Louis Armstrong, who believe it began in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Now, Louisiana is close to Mississippi, and there's probably people going back and forth. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, but let's go with the Delta, because you're right. All the early players, and Muddy was from there too. Clarksdale, being an official capital of the Delta, they were from there, and you know, there's the different styles, the Delta blues, and the Piedmont blues, which is sort of like Georgia, South Carolina, is a different thing. But the Delta, a good description to me, a raw, or the rawest form of blues, very much a driving rhythm, and the bottleneck slide. There you go, Delta blues.
Yes, non-electricity.
Not yet. And Bob could tell that story with Buddy, just sort of discovering it. That's a great story with Buddy.
Yeah.
Going best records and playing electric. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hoping he's coming back on. So, so Robert Johnson dies in 1938.
Correct.
He along many other people, Son House, a lot of others. They waved the flag for the Delta Blues. 1951, Elmore James records "Dust My Broom," which was a Robert Johnson song.
Yes, it was.
What he does with it is he electrifies it, and it's a brand new sound.
And by the way, Johnson's version does not have slide on it.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Though he was a great slide guitar player, but his version does not. So
let's wait till Bob comes back on to the Elmore James. Let's talk about a little bit of the importance of Elmore James. Here's a question: what is the time frame between and what was the relationship between Elmore James and Muddy Waters? Did they know each other?
Bob, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Oh, go ahead.
Thanks for your indulgence. I'm sure they did, and they were both very popular Chicago blues musicians around the same time.
Okay, so
Muddy had hits a couple of years before Elmore James did, but Elmore James was very popular. He was an amazing singer and slide guitar player, and he really sang with his electric guitar. He played in an open tuning most of the time.
Yeah.
But he could play standard tuning too, and there were a few songs that he did that way, but most of it is that famous, it's actually an Apple ringtone. Like that.
Yep.
That's
Dust My Broom.
That's exactly. That's an electric lick he did from a Robert Johnson lick that actually wasn't played on slide guitar,
which I am now learning. Yeah. Yes. So So were they? Would you say they're competitors, or they were friends, or did they? I'm sure.
I don't know if they. I mean, everybody was competing for gigs in
Yeah.
Chicago, and I guess to have hit records, but
Mhm.
I know Muddy really loved that music when we were doing some shows in 1977 that had featured Johnny Winter and James Cotton.
Mhm.
Uh, Johnny played Dust My Broom, and Muddy sang a couple of verses of it, which I'd never heard him do before.
Yeah. So Muddy. Let me. Why? What do you think the reason Muddy, once he gets to Chicago in 19, was it 43? He gets to Chicago. He comes with an acoustic instrument initially,
Probably.
and then the reason he switched to electric because that was the sound. It was a loud city. Dave, can you help me with this?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true, Rod. I think
He couldn't be
Bob
heard.
could correct me on the chronology here in the history, but I would say that's pretty much true. And if I had, just because you're asking the question right now, Muddy's first recordings, this is fascinating. Again, we were just talking about before you came back, Bob, about wanting to see history as a straight line, but it's
And
not.
it's like
It's
that.
not that. But that Muddy's first recordings for Aristocrat, he's playing electric and he's kind of sounding a little bit like T-Bone Walker. He's not sounding like Delta Blues.
Hmm.
So if Bob, if you want to take it from there, go ahead.
Well, yeah, Muddy did have some recording sessions and the songs didn't catch on at all in the mid 1940s. But when he used an electric guitar and played the same Delta blues he'd been playing in Mississippi in the early 1940s, but through an electric guitar with a slightly distorted and very expressive tone, his slide guitar playing in open G tuning and standard tuning, uh, those were very, very attractive. Plus, he had a magnetic charisma. You just couldn't stop listening to him or
Yeah.
looking at
And
him as
watching
if
him,
he
yeah.
was playing. And he was also one of the greatest blues singers ever.
Yeah.
Really at the top of human achievement in that field.
Yes.
And one of the on the short list of one of the greatest, both singing and guitar. That made me dizzy when I first heard him on a radio show in the mid 60s. I said, oh my God, that voice. And then, wow, he's got a great slide guitar player too.
Yeah. He did a full package, and he inspired other people to be that full package. It's not just a guitar player, but it's how many people are who they are because of Muddy Waters. At least it
That is
was.
certainly true, and a really good point, Rod, because he was inspiring that way. Little Walter, the harmonica player that was in his band in from the late 1940s on, was probably like the Jimi Hendrix of it. Nobody's caught up to him
Hmm.
since, and millions of people love it. Well, a lot of harmonica players and blues fans really love his music, but he played some of his best music when he was playing with Muddy,
Yeah.
and he played even after he was out of the band because he had hits on his own. He still recorded with Muddy and throughout the 1950s. That's the biggest example of what you said. Somebody who was influenced and moved by him. If I relate that to myself, certainly my most visible moments happened with Muddy, and for some people, that's all I'm known for, even though it's more than 40 years since I've been out of his band
Yeah.
and doing things on my own. I hope people like them. I really enjoy both playing, and I enjoy teaching.
Okay.
But that Muddy Waters is gigantic. I've tried to bring that to the instructional books
You
that
and you
we've
did.
done.
Yeah.
The first one was actually on Muddy style, but the other two have sections in them that are really dedicated to what he did in the rhythm guitar book and the slide guitar book, especially.
Mhm.
We all also went in the slide guitar book. We went into a number of other players from primitive to very modern. And I had to like learn some of the older and the newer ones. I had to learn their styles well enough to teach them,
Okay. So that
which
that
was
that
quite a challenge.
yeah, I can
Thanks,
imagine.
Dave.
Yes.
But he was well up to it. I
Yeah.
have to say, I know there was some times when he was probably, let's put this delicately, a little unhappy with me. But we got through that, and the book is great. And Bob played everything he was supposed to do, and marvelously, actually.
No, I was never not unhappy with you, but as I was trying to rise to that occasion, it was hard. It was homework. I had to learn something, as I say, not just learn it, but learn it well enough to teach it. And there is a real point where you don't want to just duplicate what somebody played, but get
You
the
want
essence
to
of the
embody it.
style. So
Yeah.
before I could play it note for note, I would stop and just try and interpret the style.
Yeah.
And we would play in the style of, rather than
Of course.
lick for lick. Here's
And that's what I
it is.
gathered from a lot of this stuff. And I'm going to say to Dave's end, how you notate blues, there's a special place for you because this is not notating. There are limitations in notation in blues, but the fact
There are.
that
There are.
there,
Sometimes, Rod, you literally have to write play behind the beat
yeah,
rather than notating notes that look like that. I
yeah,
mean, it gets crazy, you know.
yeah,
You sort of have to know what that means and listen to the music. You really have to listen.
yeah. And I wonder how much do we ever do? Okay, so there's blues educators here. Do we ever talk about vibe? When I say that, like the idea of imitating the vibe of a sound in the dirt, do y'all think in those terms, or am I just inventing something that doesn't belong in your vocabulary?
No, I
No, that's right to the point.
What
One
you
of
were
the
saying?
most attractive things about the music can't be found in the notation,
Yeah,
but it it speaks to our lower emotions, things besides the head, lower parts, lower body parts.
hmm,
It's like your heart
yeah,
and other parts.
hmm.
It's nasty and greasy, like some of the most
And how do you
the most
notate
wonderful human
nasty and greasy?
experience.
And do you hear what I said? And how do you notate nasty and greasy? It's tricky. It's tricky. So it's a Dave.
don't think you can actually. I mean,
Yeah.
you really have to hear it.
Huh?
So important.
That is
And
yeah.
then feel it.
Hmm.
And then feel it. It really is. And Bob can speak, to this better than most people at all, because look who he played with, and the musician he is himself, because he is that musician too. He is the blues man too, who feels it as deeply and expresses as deeply as the people that he played with.
Yes, absolutely. So with the tonality of the Muddy Waters and the in the 50s kind of thing, everybody wants to attribute distortion, and I've been guilty of this myself. Go to Rocket 88 has been a benchmark, but you listen to these recordings that you're talking about, and there is distortion late 40s, early 50s. Just there was already that grease. So the tonality of the whole thing, that is something that people can learn from. It didn't start with a hole in a speaker.
No, it didn't. And if I can join in and ask Bob, direct this to Bob. And you and I talked about this already, Rod, that blues musicians, from the beginning of playing electric instruments, you want to go back to T-Bone, maybe even slightly before him. He's not really the first. He's just was the most famous early one. Figured out, you can join in on this, Bob, anytime you're ready. Figured out really quickly what happened when you turned the amp up. That you weren't just getting a louder acoustic guitar, it was another instrument, and it was really expressive. Really expressive.
So with one of the things you also said was like when Muddy took his Delta blues and applied it to electric, that was when he found his style. That's when people responded. So he was clearly not the T-Bone Walker guy. But that, in other words, that kind of imitation didn't serve him. It's like is going from his straight, taking his Delta experience and just let's going for it. Okay, so now we talk a little bit about delay time, Bob.
It's what it was Muddy's term for playing behind the beat.
Okay,
And it's not a musical term, but it's really excellent.
it is.
You delay playing the note or the phrase that you're going to play or sing, just a tiny, almost imperceptible bit, but it makes the listener just not be able to wait for the next note. Oh, this is going to be, please hit it.
Yeah.
And when it gets there, it feels extra good. It's almost like a technique used in many other art forms to, wait for it.
Yeah.
Even though it's only a microsecond. And then when it gets there, yeah.
Is it kind of like Roboto? We're talking Roboto. You get feeling it, and you're not pushing the grid.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like when I say pushing the grid, it's like everything is like notated in some music that you have your 16th notes, but the Roboto is just feeling, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, just getting loose with it.
I would say, Rod, sort of.
Okay.
Maybe more subtle though.
Okay.
It is still referencing the groove and the beat, but if that's the metronome right there, it's slightly to the left.
Okay.
But it's not way to the left.
Yeah.
It's slightly to the left, and it brings people feel that. And it brings out an emotion in them. Sometimes they don't know what delay time is.
Of course not. Yeah.
Let Bob say that. I think that, would you say that's fairly accurate, Bob?
Yeah, I think you put it well.
Okay, so now the role of the rhythm guitar player. I was reading some of your stuff, and you were talking about getting to play with other people, and your purpose in playing with other people. And rhythm guitar, you were talking about trying to create a thing that goes along with all. How do you view your role as a rhythm guitarist?
In Chicago blues, it was different from what lead and rhythm guitar means to most other people. Uh, Lead guitar would be the solos and fills that George Harrison played in the Beatles. Rhythm guitar would be strumming the chords like John Lennon did. In Chicago blues, which was an earlier form of music, they didn't have one person playing the chords and another playing the solo and fills. They both, the guitar parts would weave in and out of them. That's a term that Keith Richards used for it and said that the Rolling Stones had taken that from Chicago blues.
Yeah.
And that was their guitar strategy in the Stones. However, Jimmy Rogers, who was a guitar player in Muddy's band in the classic time, 25 years before I was there, told me once later on that it was a very deliberate guitar strategy. And he said that he and Muddy used to call it filling in the cracks. When one went high, the other one went low.
Okay.
You had to do it by knowing the music, knowing the player, and being in the moment. And there's certainly a little bit of ESP in it to be able to figure out what was going to go on. The two guitar parts would go together like one person with four hands playing two guitars, and or sometimes there would be a tension and release when it sounded like it was going in a strange direction, but then it would resolve itself at the end of a phrase. And all these things are subliminal and not thought of while you're playing. It's, I mean, you can play, you know the language of this music, you know the style of playing with the players you're with. It's certainly different playing in what I do often. I would present myself as somebody said, Bob, bring a band. It would be me and a harp player and a drummer. And I'll cover a lot of ground on that guitar. But on the other hand, in Muddy Waters band, we not only had me and Muddy playing guitar, but another guitar too.
Yeah.
And there was also bass, piano, harp, and drums. And sometimes there would be 5 people in that band kind of playing a bass line at once, and not all the same bass line. So it was quite a rumble on the bottom.
So the listening, it's a heightened listening and reacting.
Yes, that's very important is the listening to, you can't just pick apart and execute it. You have to listen and make it work together with somebody, and then you might get rewarded by how good the music sounds.
Yeah.
Or if you're on Muddy's bandstand, if he turns around and smiles, they say, oh, that's great. Nobody can tell me nothing now.
I was gonna say that's your Grammy Award.
I think, yeah, it's actually, it's easier to get a Grammy than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can I jump in for a second here? I don't know how much more time you have, but if I can make a suggestion of a question, and I don't want to do your job here.
Go ahead.
Bob, to get Bob to talk about Muddy playing in, going back to Muddy playing slide, playing in open tunings and then playing in standard tunings, because he did both, and he sort of changed where I think he only played in standard later in his career, but Bob can really explain that well. I think it's really pertinent to
that would be
what we're talking.
Open versus open, like early in his career was open G.
Open G, yeah. Or sometimes he would tune the guitar a whole step higher, and it would be an open A.
Yeah.
If he wanted to sing in a higher register.
Okay.
And your voice cuts more in A than in G.
Okay.
Muddy had a really wide range. He could sing very deep, and he was very comfortable singing up high too. But yeah, those were the two that he used. that guitar player, Jimmy Rogers, who was 10 years younger than Muddy, but was in Chicago around the same time. And they started playing together at house parties and clubs in the 1940s. He told me that he taught Muddy to play in standard tuning. And Muddy was creative enough to take his slide and find the notes that he wanted to play in standard tuning, and sounded really, really good doing it. His slides solos and standard, most of them are very similar to each other,
which to me is
but
one of the hardest things to do.
it's very, very powerful and very attractive musically.
So when
I'd like to pull out a slide, not on every song, but on the songs where it will be effective if you're trying to evoke the old style of Chicago blues, or just use a slide to play lyrically. It's wonderful for being a voice that you don't have in your throat.
yeah. So Muddy, when you were with him, he was mostly, would you say he was mostly standard, or was he still an open G?
Mostly standard, but I had seen him before I was in the band, and a few times while I was in it, he would tune the guitar to open A and play a few songs that way, and then go back to the other tuning. He
Yeah.
also had perfect pitch and could just tune the guitar up like that and get it. They hadn't invented tuners yet.
Yeah.
By the way, as soon as Muddy was on a tour with the Allman Brothers in 1975 and saw they had a Conn Strobe tuner, he says, "We need one of those." And a couple of days later, they had one and a road case for it.
Wow.
And then he said, "Bob, tune up my guitar," and your own, of course, and the other guitar player and the bass player had to use it too.
Yeah.
On those things, you had to turn a dial to change what note you wanted to hit.
Yeah.
And then there'd be this little spinning wheel on this piece of electronic equipment that would tell when the wheel stopped spinning, you were in tune.
Yeah.
One of the other guys in the band tuned his guitar up. He didn't know you had to change the change the knob, so he tuned his guitar to 6 E's and then went on stage and started to play Sweet Home Chicago or something.
With all E's?
Yes.
Okay.
It didn't work well.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
It sure sounded funny. He immediately said, "Take it," and ran off the stage.
So
Probably said a few dirty words.
I liked it in the book you were talking about how was it David Honeyboy Edwards was like, real blues musicians don't use open slide tunings. and you say respectively, Son House is a real blues musician. Muddy Waters is a real blues musician.
I added that part, but yeah, respecting Honey Boy Edwards and whatever he might think or feel, he's a great musician, and fortunately, he's one of those people from 2015. I think what did he pass in 2010 or something like that? He was out there a long.
He was the last of the Mohicans, and he was the last one around.
It was one of the last, if not the last, of his generation.
Yeah, like 2011 maybe.
Yeah, Ponto Perkins, the piano player, was born in 1913. That was in Muddy's band, passed at 97 in 2011.
How was it when you were Muddy? Did you play with any of the old members? Like, did he
Well,
ever get back? Did he
they
ever get
were
back
all
with?
older than me.
Well, you know what I mean. Some of his older, like, I know he had Otis Spann as a piano player, and
That was before I was in the band,
yeah, okay,
and he had passed away about 3 or 4 years before I was in the band.
okay,
He's one of my favorite musicians, but I never did get to see him, and certainly not play with him. Although a schoolmate of mine named Peter Malik, kind of when Span left Muddy's band for a few months before he got sick and passed away, uh, Peter, who's about my age, played with him and then wrote his illness down with him in 1969.
all right. I was in Chicago blues slide guitar. One of the good things about these, I like what they're doing to these books. Now your videos are just as informative. Now I'm a history guy, as Bob or Dave knows. Um, but the fact that we can listen to you play the style is absolutely, that sells it for me. I want to thank you, Bob, and thank you, Dave. And do we have any other stories that we want to leave our listeners with? That Dave, I'm gonna throw the football to you.
Well, I listen. Bob has
Hmm.
plenty more. So I was going to put him on the spot here, Bob. Um, there, one of two or two. It's up to you
Two.
to come to mind. And you've told me so many, and I don't even know them all. But the listeners here might get a kick out of them. The bottle of beer in the pants is a good one, and the Eric Clapton
That wasn't
story.
my story.
What's that?
That wasn't my story, but
Well, you told it.
that Paul Usher, the harp player that was in Muddy's band in the late '60s that passed this year, used to talk about that Muddy putting a like in the middle of a song, he'd pull a beer bottle out from his pants and then let it foam all over the place. That, which I think is incredibly romantic, don't you?
Ladies, what was the
Muddy,
Eric
on
Clapton?
the other hand, did have a wardrobe malfunction in New York City.
All right, explain yourself.
He was singing the song "Mannish Boy," and somehow the hoss got out of the barn.
Oh, we.
And I actually heard the story corroborated by two other people who were on that show at the Paramount Theater, B.B. King and Nappy Brown, a great rhythm and blues singer.
Mhm.
They said they heard from backstage that the audience was going crazy, so they peeked out to see, and Muddy was out there singing and quite exposed apparently, and rather prominently. So now what Muddy himself told me about it is, he said, I didn't mean for that to happen, but it did happen. And I was singing the song Mannish Boy, which is a take on Bo Diddley's song I'm a Man, but Muddy was going, I'm a man, I'm a man. And he looked down, I'm a man.
Yeah, he just went with it.
So,
Probably
Bob,
you can't unring the bell.
interesting, the name that Muddy had for his manhood and his guitar. He called them the what?
Hoss.
Haas. Okay. How did you
Yes, Wilbur.
who gave you Steady Rolling? Who gave you that nickname?
There was a DJ in Boston that had a college radio blues show, and he asked if he could introduce the band one night, and I was able to arrange it for him quite easily. He speed rapped the entire introduction. And when he got to my name, he said, "And from right here in Boston, we have Steady Rollin' Bob Margolin." And I said, "I'll take that."
Yeah.
It's Steady Rollin' is from the song Steady Rollin' Man by Robert Johnson, but
Okay.
it also rhymes with my last name. So I said, okay, I like the Robert Johnson song. I did not even have a place to live at the time. I just had a suitcase and a guitar and was on the road, or either out on the road with Muddy or staying with whoever I was seeing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was definitely rolling.
Mm-hmm.
It worked for me. It is strange when people say Steady Rollin' Bob Margolin. They could kind of take a hint from the roll and how the last name is spelled, but the name Margolin seems to be almost impossible for some people to say.
Yeah. No. I think I said it right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I say it right every time.
Yeah.
Muddy said it differently every time.
But he's
And
Muddy
the
Waters.
only
He can
time-
do whatever he
but it
wants.
seemed like every time that we were recording, and you can hear the band introduced, a few times that happened, he said it perfectly correctly, but he mangled it all kinds of ways, and people found that humorous.
How was his humor?
He could have a very dry humor, like he looked at me in a spiritual way before a show one time, and he said, "You know that slow blues that you play before I come up?" And I go, "Uh-oh, yeah." He says, "You know that high note that you hit in that slow blues?" "Yeah." "It sounds like someone stepped on a cat."
That's his direction.
That was one way. He could also make incredibly vulgar jokes. I've been told that musicians can have a pretty raw sense of humor, and he did.
All right. Well, thank you both. Thank you both for this Chicago Blues Slide Guitar, the complete and definitive guide by Steady Rollin' Bob Margolin and Dave Rubin.
At the beginning,
Amazon, you can get them Amazon, you can Music Dispatch as well. Okay, and the videos that go along with it are wonderful. I think that really helps everything to get the sound together. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, both of you.
Always a pleasure, Rod. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So anyway, I will see you, and thank you for this. All right.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch, Rod.
Absolutely.
Okay.
thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right, Bob, I'll talk to you later.
Okay,
All right.
Bye.
bye.